I want to watch this tonight. 2 hours and 10 minutes.
Is this your first time in Israel?
Yeah.
Yours too?
Yeah.
You'll have to come visit during peacetime as well.
Yeah, when is that? Like 120 years ago or whatever?
Come with your grandkids.
Yeah. Good one.
Look, everything's relative. When we say come in peacetime, we mean not in the middle of an active war on 7 fronts.
Okay, okay. 7 fronts, don't forget that. So you were spokesman, Western-facing English-speaking media.
Yes.
What how do you perceive Israel's international presence? In terms of how do you think people perceive Israel? Do you think that Israel does a good job of communicating what it wants to, or?
Our international standing is in free fall at the moment after 8 months of a horrible war, 8 months of a concerted propaganda campaign by Hamas, amplified by UN officials who have unfortunately been hijacked by the Palestinian cause, covering up how they've been hijacking aid, covering up how they've been waging war out of hospitals. The world is growing increasingly fed up with the war and wants it to go away, and Israelis understand that we simply cannot end this war abandoning the hostages there or leaving Hamas in power, because there will be a next time and it will be worse. And so Israelis are paying a very painful price for a war we didn't, I keep saying again and again, we didn't want, we didn't start, we didn't expect, or it's been forced to fight, despite the painful price on, around the world.
What do you think, why does Israel suck so much at doing foreign communication?
Look, I've got a lot of complaints about the way that Israel structures its public relations. I think we need a full-time fleet of spokespeople in all languages. It's not something we have. When this war started, I was a private citizen. I was not involved with this government. The closest I'd come to this government was protesting against it in the regular protests every week. But the war happened and it was all hands on deck, and you saw this emergency mobilization of Israeli society where people said, okay, let's put our politics to the side for a moment and we'll do whatever we have to do in order to win this. And I found myself in 3 days, it's really an only in Israel story, going from giving interviews in my living room as a private citizen to standing behind a podium at his Prime Minister's office and giving official interviews. That's not the way that Israel should work. Israel should have professional full-time spokespeople in all languages. But it goes deeper than that, because at the end of the day, we're outnumbered. We're outmanned. There are many more people on the other side than there are of us. And even if you don't look at the ratio of how many Jews there are to Arabs in the world, or Jews to Muslims in the world, and we're a tiny minority, there are only 15 million Jews in the world total. You have decades of, I can say, indoctrination on Western university campuses, telling this whole oppressor ideology, painting Israel as some colonial settler state, that has meant, unfortunately, that when a war starts, there are many people who are automatically predisposed to believing the worst about Israel.
Bro, this alien guy is in PR mode 100% of the time? Yes, he's always in Israeli spokesperson mode, yeah.
And want on our side to begin with, no matter the most talented spokespeople and best infographics and soundbites we throw their way.
Do you think that's I feel like that explanation doesn't account for the fact that Israel used to have a lot more, the balance of sympathy I think used to be very different, especially when you consider that a lot of what would have been left-wing heroes of the times, like MLK or Rosa Parks or even up to Mandela, there was much more sympathy for the Israeli cause as well, right? But now it seems like that's more or less gone from that side of politics. So do you think there's a reason that changed?
At times Israel had more support, but I wouldn't exaggerate it and suggest there was a time that Israel was ever fully embraced in the family of nations. There are still many people who do not think that this country should exist at all, and that's the root of this conflict. Unfortunately, left-wing discourse. By the way, Israel used to be a left-wing cause, the first country to recognize.
I wonder if we didn't get the audio off this mic for some reason, because it sounds like it's just being picked up by the background ones.
Israel was actually the Soviet Union, okay? And Israel was considered the darling of the global left because they understood that it stood for values of equality and self-determination, etc. But there's been a shift in global international left-wing discourse, one that views everything through the lens of colonialism, and takes this story of a persecuted and scattered people returning to build a country in their ancestral homeland, in the state of Israel, and painting that as being some sort of colonial settler enterprise. The left has shifted as well. It's not that Israel shifted away. The goalposts have moved, and the ideology that's being told about oppressor oppressed places Israel within that nexus that paints it as being the ultimate villain and the ultimate enemy, no matter what it does.
What do you want to do? But I'm not. I don't want to turn it into a full-on debate. I'm just.
I'm happy to. We've got a long ride ahead of us.
That is true.
Okay, I think I'll maybe push back against 2 things.
Oh, so this is our first time chatting with them. They wanted to film on the way there, which I thought was fine, but I don't know if I want to do a hardcore, crazy debate in the van. It seems like it'd be kind of weird.
Give me your toughest.
So the way I see it is that, well, I feel like the original, although they used the language in different ways, the original people who came to Israel called themselves settlers and colonialists. They weren't imperial. They weren't backed by a mother state, and they it doesn't make sense to say that. They
call themselves colonialists.
They said they were colonial. They said that they were doing was colonial. Yeah, Herzl said that. Yeah, they use that word a different way, right? So it's some people say oh, we'll go colonize Mars, right?
Do you want to hear a funny story about the early Zionist movement?
Sure.
When the first Zionist Congress met in Basel in 1897, Herzl told all the various Jewish delegates to go out and rent the best top hats and three-piece suits that they could. None of them owned top hats and three-piece suits. They said, we're building a movement now that needs to influence and impress powerful people in Europe. Let's look the part. Zionism has always been about faking it until you make it, okay? The early Zionists understood we're choosing the land of Israel as opposed to, Uganda, which the British offered the Zionist movement at some point. Because this is our ancient homeland, because this is literally where we're from. The word Jew comes from Judea. And if they had to paint it within language that would make it appeal to the great powers of the day, they framed it in language that would appeal to the great powers of the day. It didn't change the fact that this was a movement that looked around Europe and said, dark clouds are on the horizon. We've been persecuted for 2,000 years. It's getting worse. Our societies hate us. And the best way to keep ourselves safe is to build a sovereign state in which we can take charge of our own fate and our own destiny and protect ourselves. And they certainly didn't imagine it being colonial in the same way that, the British went and colonized Canada or Australia or America.
I feel like the principal failing for Israel, and the reason why it's so hard to garner sympathy, and I think it's impossible right now to garner sympathy for Israel, is because in the early stages of the conflict or whatever, pre-48 to post-48, you had a feeling, not even a feeling, but legitimately it was Israel versus the Arab world. But, past 79 and onwards, as individual countries have been extricated from that conflict and then everybody else has kind of cooled down on things, you just have Israel versus the Palestinians. And I feel like that's a conflict that is impossible to garner sympathy for. That as much as Israel might try to say, well, what about Hezbollah, what about the Houthis, what about Iran, the only thing people see are Israel and the Palestinians. And then until that gets resolved, there's no hope for any kind of international goodwill. That's what it feels like.
First of all, you're looking at things through a magnifying glass. This is not a local war between Israel and a terrorist organization in Gaza. This is a war in which Israel is under attack from Iran and its proxy armies on 7 different fronts.
The 7 fronts.
At the same time that we're dealing with Hamas in Gaza and the monsters who perpetrated the October 7th massacre. We have Palestinian terrorists in the West Bank. We have Hezbollah raining rockets on northern Israel. Just today, an attempted ballistic missile strike on Eilat from the Houthi rebels in Yemen. Attacks from Syria. Just a few days ago, a UAV was intercepted from Iraq. And it's only been a few weeks, we've managed to forget it already, since Israel came under attack from Iran as well, with a massive attack of 350 ballistic cruise missiles and UAVs. So you have to zoom out and understand those are the dynamics of what is happening in the Middle East right now. Iran has built a coalition of proxy armies that are determined to destroy this country, not in one big strike, but essentially through a war of attrition. And part of that attrition is eroding Israel's international standing and legitimacy. Try to drive this country into the ground. That's what Israel's fighting now.
I understand that, and I think that's the thing that you could say on the macro level, but there's a visceral feeling, you talk about Iran shoots 350 missiles at Israel in a day and it injures one Jewish girl. I don't think she died, did she?
Bedouin girl.
Bedouin girl?
Bedouin.
Yeah, it injures one person. Israel shoots one missile and can kill 350,000 civilians. Not to say that they're targeting something, but I'm saying the scope is so different in terms of what the capabilities are. Even if you start grouping all these people together, Hamas, Hezbollah, terrorists in the West Bank, and then you compare it to the IDF.
Because this attack by Iran a few months ago was the biggest ballistic missile attack in the history of the world. It compares only with Russia's initial attack on Ukraine in the early stage of the war, but that was over a much bigger territory. We managed to repel it, and we repelled it because we were working with allies and because we spend 7% of our GDP on defense, because our taxes are so high because we have to invent and pioneer and purchase and create the weapons that are going to keep us safe from a crazy religious fundamentalist regime that is trying to destroy us all. But the fact that we're so good at defending ourselves doesn't mean...
Imagine this dude debating Hassan. Anybody that knows anything about Israel-Palestine would destroy Hassan in a debate, this guy included. But Hassan just does propaganda. He doesn't know anything about the actual region, so...
The threat is not massive of this Iranian regime and its coalition of proxy armies. Hamas is one of them, Hezbollah, the Houthis are others. That are determined to destroy this country. This is what the war is about at the moment.
I understand what you're saying, but internationally, the sympathy is not going to be there, right? I think people at the end of the day, as stupid as it is, they look at body counts, right? How many soldiers, how many civilians have Hezbollah killed, in the past 15 years? How many people have died in Gaza from the invasion from the war now, right? Even just going by militant count, more people died in Gaza on the Palestinian side than probably what, all the fatalities of the 6-day war, all the fatalities of Yom Kippur, all the fatalities, it's just
I see that, but I think it's the wrong way to look at it, because you have our enemies trying as hard as they can to kill as many people as possible, and we're spending an absolute fortune to try to defend ourselves, to keep ourselves safe. And we're trying to kill as few people as possible while they're deliberately embedded in civilian areas and building their tunnels under schools and homes and hospitals, because they want to maximize civilian harm. So yes, if you look at the raw numbers, you would think, wow, this is evil, aggressive Israel attacking the Palestinians, but you understand the dynamics of what is happening. You have Hamas and Iran trying to kill as many people as possible and failing because we're really good at defending ourselves, and Israel trying to reduce harm to civilians as much as possible. And you know what? Not doing the worst job when you compare civilian to combatant ratios and other wars.
Sure.
But could do a much better job if they weren't so determined to hide behind civilian targets. And here's the thing, Hamas keeps on moving with the civilians every time they move in Gaza. So the goalposts and the targets keep moving.
Yeah, I don't disagree with you. Believe it or not, I'm the pro-Zionist of the two of us. I'm just saying that internationally, that communication, I don't think it doesn't feel like international audiences can ever feel that or sympathize with that, because it just at the end of the day comes down to people are going to scream at the, they're going to hit you over the head with the raw numbers over and over again, basically.
Well, they hit you with the raw numbers and not necessarily the accurate numbers, right?
Doesn't matter, right?
Because we know that Hamas has been making things up. I mean, for example, there was the incident early on in the war.
The
Al-Ahli hospital, exactly. Hamas claims an Israeli airstrike hits a hospital, destroys it, kills 500 people. Turns out in the morning it was the shrapnel from an Islamic Jihad rocket. It hit the car park of the hospital and far fewer people killed, maybe double digits. The official Hamas number of reported casualties includes the 500 people it claims were killed at the Al-Ahli hospital.
Yeah, I'm very, very aware of that.
Okay.
This circles back to the first question I was asking you. I don't mean it as like an aggressive, like Israel sucks question. I mean, why does the foreign media? It seems like Israel has a problem communicating these things to the foreign press.
I don't know. You're the foreign media. You tell me.
Well, the only reason I fucking read so much about this stupid fucking conflict is because of how crazy the facts are from what the international feeling is. It's like, it's crazy to me how divergent it is. And then it's crazy to me that I don't understand.
What's the difference between being pro-Zionist and being definitionally Zionist? Probably nothing, but I mean, some people might say that technically only Jews can be Zionists, and if you're like a Christian that supports a Jew, you would be like a pro-Zionist, but because you support them. But I think some people would just say if you support Israel having a ethno-state at all, that makes you a Zionist. So all these terms are like used colloquially now. So it's
understand how Israel, that fashioned itself as like a Western-style democracy country that speaks the language of the West. When I read all of the, early conversations between your Ben Gurions, your Moshe Dayans, your Golda Meirs, all of these people that were talking were so understanding of like how the West would view everything, that today the people that speak to the West the best are Hamas. That I was talking to Mordecai Kadar, the doctor who lives in my head now for some of the points he's bringing up. The idea that, and then another super pro-Zionist friend, like the most effective piece of Israeli propaganda that you guys made in the course of this war was made by Hamas, and it was the girl in the back of the truck. And the idea that, when bombs go off in Israel, you guys are rushing to bury the bodies, sometimes even too quickly, the Zaka volunteers, maybe to the detriment of the investigation, whereas Hamas has no problem. Palestinians will hold dead babies up to the camera, shaking them and screaming to garner the international sympathy.
But there you understand where this country's perhaps greatest weakness is also its greatest strength. We refuse to be victims, and we refuse to parade our suffering and grief for the world to see, even if we know that, shaking dead babies in front of the camera is going to give you international sympathy, because this is a country that sees itself as the place where the Jewish people, after 2,000 years of persecution, are able to take their fate in their hands and to defend themselves, and not have to play this pity politics game.
Maybe it'd be good to do that a little bit.
Maybe it would be, but it would be degrading and dehumanizing. And self-respect.
Well, degrading, but now the degrading and dehumanizing thing is looking at the ICC is potentially going to issue an arrest warrant for Netanyahu, where the ICJ is now considering, which
is insane, and it's insane not just because of the comparison that they're making between Israeli and Hamas leaders, but it's insane because of the content of the allegations themselves. The idea that Israel is somehow trying to starve civilians in Gaza, when just last week there were 1,900 trucks that went into the Gaza Strip. Far more food than is entering the Gaza Strip compared with before the war. Even according to the UN's figures, it's going up. There are no restrictions on aid going in. Israel continues to let aid into Gaza, even though Egypt refused for a while to let aid get to Keren Shalom, and Hamas keeps shooting rockets at the Israeli crossings. We lost 4 soldiers who were killed because Hamas is attacking the humanitarian aid crossing. And the gulf between the reality of what Israel is doing to get aid into Hamas-run Gaza, when we know that Hamas is stealing that aid, but hey, it's still important that some of it reach civilians, and the accusations against Israel makes people's heads explode. And so Israelis have a lot less respect for international institutions than people around the world, definitely countries that sit on the Security Council and have a role in shaping these organizations, because we see that these are essentially extensions of the political war against us and not genuinely neutral organizations.
I feel like I have a few thoughts about why things maybe changed a little bit in a way that Israel could have probably controlled a bit better.
Alan is so obsessed with how things should be seen that you can't see how they actually are. Maybe that's a problem you run into a lot with a lot of people in Israel.
It felt like in the past that Israel kind of just depended on Palestinian propaganda and advocacy generally being a little bit worse, because it was coming from people like the PLO or directly from people like Arafat, who were not always as effective. But now it seems that most of the Palestinian advocacy comes from people who have nothing to do with the West Bank or Gaza, right? Even all the Palestinian voices you see on Western media are people who grew up in Europe or America, people like Omar Badar or Mouin Rabbani, or if the other side you got Finkelstein, right? So, but I feel like the way that Israel kind of shuts out the international approach is so bad that one example I came across recently was that during Cast Lead, there was the whole dispute about whether or not the police officers who were killed in the first day were militants or civilian officers. And I know that the Goldstone report obviously said they were civilians most likely, and then the Israeli intel report is this only accessible in Hebrew document with that you can kind of get translated if you're a bit resourceful, and everything's scattered all over the place, and the explanations for why they got those numbers are like very, there's not much explanation for how they got there. The methodology is like very incomplete. But then, so I had to go myself to Hamas's own website to go through a list of people who died on the first day of Cast Lead, and I'm just going through all these obituaries and finding, oh, police officer, police officer, police officer, police, security and police. I'm like, what the fuck? So I'm like, why the fuck is Israel not got one guy doing this? This is something that's been a talking point for 16 years, right? And it's been out there for the world to see. But to this day, you can be an academic, you can quote like Finkelstein or the Goldstone report or B'Tselem, and you can say, oh, on this day of Cast Lead, Israel massacred a bunch of donut-eating traffic cops, you know? Yeah.
First of all, citizen journalism at its finest, and more power to you going and actually researching it yourself. I've become increasingly depressed in the course of this war that facts and truth don't matter, even when you literally put it in front of people's faces. My favorite example. Israel discovered that Hamas had an intelligence base, a server farm, located in an underground tunnel 18 meters under UNRWA's headquarters in Gaza. Not only was it underground, it was leaching electricity from the UNRWA offices above ground.
Oh, and you could see the exit, I think, right out of the side of the building, because there was literally
Pretty
pictures,
wild.
I think I remember seeing of that, because people were saying, well, maybe they didn't know.
And
but,
I
like,
was
it
saying
obvious,
at the time that world leaders had suspended funding to UNRWA because it turned out that some UNRWA members had taken part in the October 7th massacre. Before you switch the funding tap on, ask to see the electricity bill for the UNRWA offices that was feeding electricity to a military server farm underground. Because there's no way that anyone there said, oh, you know what, maybe we left the TV on accidentally on the weekend. Now, it wasn't just, Israel didn't take photos and show it to the world. It went in there with the New York Times and the Washington Post and AP and Reuters and all the international agencies. It showed it to them. They saw the connection to the electricity above ground. But it doesn't matter. Even when you show them the fact and you connect the dots and you put a helmet on them and you take them in to connect the dots themselves between UNRWA and Hamas so they can see how these organizations are in league with each other, it's like the facts don't matter anymore. And judge, jury, and executioner have already made up their mind because they want to continue this, political war against Israel.
You okay there?
Me?
Oh, okay.
Oh, I'm just hanging out, yeah.
When you said you were at war on 7 fronts, was one of those fronts CNN interviewers asking about hostage ratios?
No, there are actually 8 fronts, and the 8th front is the attacks on the Jewish diaspora around the world. I just came back from Canada. They had a shooting at a Jewish school, and then there was another shooting at a school in Montreal. That's even before you get on the Jews who feel they are being pushed out of academic spaces, pushed out of entertainment, being cancelled. Look, the leader of Iran, Ayatollah Ali Khamenei, praised the campus protesters as being a branch of the resistance front. Iran, as far as Iran is concerned, they're on the same level as Hamas and Hezbollah. Why? Because when they're on campus and they're chanting from the river to the sea, Palestine will be free, Iran knows they mean the violent destruction of Israel and not some lovey-dovey secular democratic state where everyone will be free. When the campus protesters chant globalize the Intifada, Iran supports them because it knows they mean step up targeted political violence against Jews and Israelis and escalate terrorism against the West, and not some inner peaceful struggle like if you squint you can mean jihad in a nice way as well. So it's 8 fronts. It's 8 fronts as well, because Jews around the world are feeling increasingly fearful for their safety and their place in Western societies as well.
Yeah, I feel like earlier on when you say that the facts don't matter, I feel like it's almost doing the same thing that I accused the Israeli government of doing, which is just kind of like writing it off as in like no one will care anyway, even though I imagine the facts don't matter to the people protesting at Columbia University and that kind of ilk. But at the end of the day, I think polling in favor of Israel was like relatively high on October 7th, and then obviously as the war progressed, that thing started to shift.
No, I wouldn't overstate that, because
I'm not overstating, I'm just saying compared to now, right?
Polls, which are the best measure of public opinion in the United States, show consistently 80% of Americans say that they're with Israel against only 20% who say they're with Hamas. There's a big difference generationally. With the younger generation, it's more 55-45. But the American public is more united on the question of do you support Israel or Hamas than pretty much any other public policy question. And when you ask Americans, do you support a ceasefire? Of course a majority says yes. We want a ceasefire. We want the war to end. Ask them, do you support a ceasefire that leaves Hamas in power and the hostages in Gaza? Consistently, since the start of the war, 2/3 say no.
Okay. So, what was I going to say?
I just feel like the Israeli PR, I listened to that, I should know the name. What's the name of the guy, the general guy that presents some of the IDF videos sometimes? He did the one
this
recently
fucking
where he
guy.
was, is that the one who does, yeah.
The spokesman, yeah.
I just listen to the guy talk, I just don't trust him. I don't know why.
It's that,
He's got the Jew archetype. No, just kidding. Where are you guys going here? We're going north to a town called, is it Aqaba? I don't know if I'm making that up or I'm getting that from a movie. It's in northern-ish Israel to go to a party being hosted by Nas Daily.
I just feel like Israel does like PR internationally like so bad.
I feel like even when they've got like a pretty good jackpot, like the fighting the motorcycles and the weapons underneath the hospital building, they still manage to say that this calendar is actually like a list of names doing shifts to monitor hostages.
Or Agraba. Sorry, there you go.
It was a list of names. But what
Or
was it?
Agraba?
It was a
Agraba?
calendar that
Said
started on
Alexa
October
Flood,
2nd,
yeah.
And the headline at the top says Alexa Flood. It
Yeah.
was clearly a calendar that was being used by terrorists because it was the name of the operation of the October 7th massacre. So he said that it showed names instead of dates, like big deal. He flubbed one little prompt. It was still evidence of terrorist activity in the basement of the Rantisi hospital.
Yeah, I just feel like, I don't know, I know Hagari is supposed to be like media trained and everything. Actually, never mind. When it comes to the Israeli government, I feel like you were let go as the spokesperson over some tweets that I don't think were necessarily that wild, as far as I remember.
Which is how you know that wasn't really the reason.
Yeah. The Bibi's wife? Is that what we're saying?
The story by now is well known.
Yeah, okay.
The Prime Minister's wife found out that I'd been protesting against the government before the war. She didn't like it. At some point, there was an excuse to shift me aside until I had to jump. Everyone understands that it was political.
Yeah, and meanwhile, people like Gallant are okay to go on like day 2 or something and talk about like total siege, no food, no water, human animals, and stuff like that. And like, I don't know. What do you think? Because obviously this was your job. Like, what do you think Israel could do better in terms of speaking to the English-speaking world about their situation?
First of all, I'll say specifically about the defense minister's comments on day 2 of the war about no food, human animals. Gallant was speaking in a context in which the Israeli crossings had just been attacked. The people who were manning the Erez crossing were massacred and abducted into Gaza. There were still 30 breaches along the fence where terrorists could potentially come into Israel, and there were still active gunfights inside Israel with terrorists who were hiding in the kibbutzim. He described
I don't know if there's anything super interesting. I think it's mainly just Lunar and Elon going back and forth on kind of like, and then Elon has like every pro-Israel talking point. He's not necessarily wrong. He's just won't acknowledge anything on their side.
Hamas terrorists who committed barbaric acts of gang rape as human animals. And he said, while the crossings were still being attacked, while rockets were raining down on the areas of the crossings, while there were still gunfights inside Israel, he didn't want Israel's crossings to be used to deliver goods into Gaza. Once the situation was under control, within a month, that policy very quickly changed, and Israel started admitting humanitarian aid through Kerem Shalom. So I think it's important to understand that quote in the context of an ongoing shock attack by Hamas, and to say that Israel should have allowed trucks to go through the crossings that were under attack and people had been massacred in them the day before is obviously insane and unreasonable. Look, I can, and I have this conversation domestically as well, dunk on Israeli PR and say what we should do better. We need to do a better job. We need to have full-time trained spokespeople who are not recruited as part of an emergency. The fact that I was able to be in this role shows you the best of Israel and the worst of Israel. The best of Israel because this is a country that knows how to be creative and flexible and innovate and take risks on people and throw them into battle. But this should not have happened. That there should have been full-time spokespeople when the war erupted, that they didn't need to recruit a former anti-government protester in order to explain Israel's case to the world. But it doesn't change the fact that the information battlefield that we are fighting in is not even. That we are up against not only Hamas Bara as I call it, falling on receptive ears, because there are so many more Arabs, so many more Muslims, so many more people who have gone through progressive education systems and are predisposed to believe the worst about Israel, where you have UN officials who are covering up Hamas's theft of aid and didn't condemn the attacks and the way that Hamas is waging war out of hospitals. But sometimes it feels like Israel is explaining itself alone against the world because our allies feel scared to speak up. There are people in the West who take Israel's side, but they know there is simply no point sticking their necks out and defending Israel because they're going to get death threats. I heard the other week about a very, very big pop star who is on Israel's side. I won't say who it is because I don't want to out them, but there are people out there who are on Israel's side, but they're scared because the other side, going around chanting Intifada, Intifada, with all their faces covered, is using techniques of violent intimidation. That means even the people who are taking our side won't amplify our message. And so if you're in the West, and the people who support Israel won't speak for Israel, all you hear is the shouting from the other side.
I think when you said earlier, talking about how, at least in this war, I don't think it's too difficult to make a strong case that the Iranian aspect of it is like very, very, very obvious. Like with Hamas and with the Ayatollahs praising student protesters and with
just today, the
Hezbollah.
Ayatollah of Iran said that the October 7th massacre was an attack that our region needed.
I feel like I've heard similar statements like not that long ago.
Doesn't like we're clear about how evil that regime is.
Yeah, but I think also we were speaking about people being primed to be against Israel already, and that's maybe why it's been harder to explain that contingency since October 7th.
Okay, people keep saying about this press conference. I don't care about Trump press conferences. He just says a bunch of crazy shit. I don't know what you want to like. It's just all crazy shit. I don't think he'll do. I don't know if any of this would ever happen. He just says insane shit all the time. Like.
Thank you, Mr. President, Mr. Prime Minister. You are talking tonight about the United States taking over a sovereign territory What authority would allow you to do that? Are you talking about a permanent occupation there, redevelopment? And Mr. Prime Minister, do you see this idea as a way to expand the boundaries of Israel and to have a longer peace, even though the Israeli people know how important that land is to you and your citizens, just as the space is inherited by the Palestinians as well?
I do see a long-term ownership position, and I see it bringing great stability to that part of the Middle East and maybe the entire Middle East. And everybody I've spoken to, this was not a decision made lightly. Everybody I've spoken to loves the idea of the United States owning that piece of land, developing and creating thousands of jobs with something that will be magnificent.
Like, this is never happening. He's just rambling. He's a fucking crazy person. This is just rambling. Like, I don't know what you, like.
7th. I wonder, how much do you think that is to do with not the greatest international media approach, but also just more recent policy? Because I feel like before October 7th, when Israel-Palestine was ever in the news, it was quite often to do with things like, not to do with Iranian proxies, but with settler violence, or with the Huara riots, or with like Sheikh Jarrah before that. And then, so do you think in terms of policy there are things that Israel can do better as well, or is that just like, would it not matter?
There are things we have to do better, and we have to do better because we're a democratic country that takes itself seriously, and we need to do them regardless of what they look like internationally. But they don't change what the core of the conflict is about, which is that Israel is still a small country surrounded on all sides by people who want to kill it. It's the root cause of the conflict. There are people who will not accept a state of Israel within any borders whatsoever anywhere in this land. And until you solve that, and as long as you have millions of people around the world who believe that narrative, coming not only from Islamist areas, progressive circles as well, who've been brainwashed, frankly, into thinking that Israel doesn't have a right to exist, Israel's going to keep coming up against the same challenges, even if there are things we could always do that would make it easier to explain our case. It doesn't change the fundamental dynamics that there are many people around the world for whom nothing Israel does will ever be good enough because they don't think that Israel should be at all.
I feel like it's especially hard when, because I know a very strong case you can make for Israel in terms of like lack of progress is you can say, well, historically people like Arafat or people even all the way back to al-Husseini is like there's very much a lack of willingness to compromise and to have two states and live side by side and everything. But I feel like it doesn't really help that for the last 20 odd years, for the most part of it, you've had a prime minister who seems to be just as uninterested in finding any kind of like resolution or kind of even trying to move in that direction or try to even extend an olive branch towards that progress.
I don't think it's fair because I think that the current opposition within Israeli society to the idea of two states is because we've been seared by experience, because we just know time and time again that every time Israel withdraws from territory, it explodes in our faces and it gets filled by the forces of jihad and not liberal democracy. In the 1990s, we pulled out of the Palestinian towns as part of the Oslo Accords, and we got the suicide bombers of the Second Intifada. We pulled out of southern Lebanon in 2000, and it's now controlled by Hezbollah, which has 150,000 rockets pointed and shooting at us, and 60,000 Israelis were displaced because there's an Iranian terror army on the border. We pulled out of the Gaza Strip in 2005 and got not only nearly 20 years of incessant rocket fire at Israel's cities, but the death squads of October 7th. So Israelis turn around and say, wait, you want another withdrawal? When they're telling us, we're going up Route 6 now, the West Bank, Judea and Samaria is right to our east. When they're saying, from the river to the sea, you want us to get them from the river to 9 miles away from the sea when they're telling us they want to finish the job? The Israelis have simply lost faith in the idea that our Palestinian neighbors are willing to live next to us when they tell us explicitly that they want to replace the state of Israel.
Okay, here, you tell me what you want.
Explaining, I love this phrase, West President, of the highest order, say, no, that's not what the Palestinians mean. They're telling you. They're telling you this. So Israelis say, we simply cannot take the risk of reducing our country to impossibly narrow borders, 9 miles between the river and the sea. By the way, you know in 2006, Israel had an election, and the party that won did it on the back of a pledge to withdraw from the West Bank, unilaterally if necessary. Ehud Olmert's Kadima party said, we've pulled out of the Gaza Strip, and now we're going to pull out of the West Bank, end the occupation over the Palestinians, define Israel's borders, whether they want us to separate or not. And that plan blew up in his face because of what happened in Lebanon, what happened in Gaza, and the failure of those territorial withdrawals.
Most of this is just him doing Israeli, I don't want to say propaganda, because it's not like he's lying, but... Okay, link me this. Is this right here?
Israeli Prime Minister...
Nope. Link me the press conference. Is it this?
Best districts in the world.
But do you think they're part of the...
Nope, this was earlier today, I think. Oh, I know that guy.
Listening to every and thank
Ladies and gentlemen, the President of the United States and the Prime Minister of the State of Israel.
Wow.
Thank you very much. That's a lot of press. Congratulations, you bring them out. You really bring them out. Today, I'm delighted to welcome Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu back to the White House. It's a wonderful feeling and a wonderful event. We had fantastic talks, and thank you very much with your staff. He's the first foreign head of state to visit during our administration, and Bibi, I want to say it's an honor to have you with us. Over the past 4 years, the U.S. and the Israeli alliance has been tested more than any time in history. But the bonds of friendship and affection between the American and Israeli people have endured for generations, and they are absolutely unbreakable. They are unbreakable. I'm confident that under our leadership, the cherished alliance between our two countries will soon be stronger than ever. We had a great relationship. We had great victories together 4 years ago. Not so many victories over the past 4 years, however. In my first term, Prime Minister and I forged a tremendously successful partnership that brought peace and stability to the Middle East like it hadn't seen in decades. Together, we defeated ISIS. We ended the disastrous Iran nuclear deal, one of the worst deals ever made, by the way, and imposed the toughest ever sanctions on the Iranian regime. We starved Hamas and Iran's other terrorist proxies, and we starved them like they had never seen before. Resources and support disappeared for them. I recognized Israel's capital, opened the American embassy in Jerusalem, and got it built, by the way. Built it too. Just not only designated it, but got it built at a price that nobody's seen for 40 years. We got it built. It's beautiful. All Jerusalem stone, right from nearby, and it's something that's very special. And recognized Israeli sovereignty over the Golan Heights, something that they talked about for 70 years, and they weren't able to get it, and I got it. Wow. And with the historic Abraham Accord, something that was really an achievement that was, I think, going to become more and more important because we achieved the most significant Middle East peace agreements in half a century, but the Abraham Accords in particular, and I really believe that many countries will soon be joining this amazing peace and economic development transaction. It really is a big economic development transaction. I think we're going to have a lot of people signing up very quickly. Unfortunately, for 4 years, nobody signed up. Nobody did anything for 4 years except in the negative. Unfortunately, the weakness and incompetence of those years, those past 4 years, the grave damage around the globe that was done, including in the Middle East, grave damage all over the globe. The horrors of October 7th would never have happened if I were president. The Ukraine and Russia disaster would never have happened if I were president. Over the past 16 months, Israel has endured a sustained, aggressive, and murderous assault on every front, but they fought back bravely. You see that, and you know that. What we have witnessed is an all-out attack on the very existence of a Jewish state in the Jewish homeland. The Israelis have stood strong.
How does Trump enjoy this much support from the alt-right when he's the biggest Israeli simp? Well, the far-right people criticize him a lot for the Israeli shit, but I think they also can look past it. They're very forgiving as long as he carries the... as long as he carries the party line on everything else they want. You know?
And united in the face of an enemy that has kidnapped, tortured, raped, and slaughtered innocent men, women, children, and even little babies. I want to salute the Israeli people for meeting this trial with courage and determination and unflinching resolve. They have been strong. In our meetings today, the Prime Minister and I focused on the future, discussing how we can work together to ensure Hamas is eliminated and ultimately restore peace to a very troubled region. It's been troubled, but what's happened in the last 4 years has not been good. I want to thank Prime Minister Netanyahu for working closely with my transition team, the Special Envoy Steve Witkoff, who's here somewhere. Steve? Stand up, Steve, please. What a job you've done. What a good job you've done.
Wow. Nice.
You've done a fantastic job. National Security Advisor Mike Waltz. Thank you, Mike, for working so well with us. Thank you. We have, in addition, Marco Rubio, who is on the phone right now, listening to every single word that we say, and he's going to be great. And Pete, congratulations. And Scott, congratulations. I see you're here. And Caroline's been doing a great job. She's really probably talked about more than anybody here. She's done a fantastic job, and thank you very much, Caroline. We're proud of you. But we'll only be satisfied when all of these problems are solved, and we have the team to solve them, and that's going to happen. And it's going to happen, I think, very quickly. I also strongly believe that the Gaza Strip, which has been a symbol of death and destruction for so many decades, and so bad for the people anywhere near it, and especially those who live there, and frankly, who's been really very unlucky. It's been very unlucky. It's been an unlucky place for a long time. Being in its presence just has not been good, and it should not go through a process of rebuilding and occupation by the same people that have really stood there and fought for it and lived there and died there and lived a miserable existence there. Instead, we should go to other countries of interest with humanitarian hearts, and there are many of them that want to do this, and build various domains that will ultimately be occupied by the 1.8 million Palestinians living in Gaza, ending the death and destruction and, frankly, bad luck. This could be paid for by neighboring countries of great wealth. It could be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 7, 8, 12. It could be numerous sites, or it could be one large site. But the people will be able to live in comfort and peace, and we'll make sure something really spectacular is done. They're going to have peace. They're not going to be shot at and killed and destroyed like this civilization of wonderful people has had to endure. The only reason the Palestinians want to go back to Gaza is they have no alternative. It's right now a demolition site. This is just a demolition site. Virtually every building is down. They're living under fallen concrete that's very dangerous and very precarious. They instead can occupy all of a beautiful area with homes and safety, and they can live out their lives in peace and harmony instead of having to go back and do it again. The U.S. will take over the Gaza Strip, and we will do a job with it, too. We'll own it and be responsible for dismantling all of the dangerous unexploded bombs and other weapons on the site, level the site and get rid of the destroyed buildings, level it out, create an economic development that will supply unlimited numbers of jobs and housing for the people of the area, do a real job, do something different. Just can't go back. If you go back, it's going to end up the same way it has for 100 years. I'm hopeful that this ceasefire could be the beginning of a larger and more enduring peace that will end the bloodshed and killing once and for all. With the same goal in mind, my administration has been moving quickly to restore trust in the alliance and rebuild American strength throughout the region. And we've really done that. We're a respected nation again. A lot's happened in the last couple of weeks.
Not interrupting, he's reading a script for it. Well, yeah, if he has to talk in detail about any of this, he'll have to, because there's no fucking idea what's going on with any of this shit, of course.
Nation again. I ended the last administration's de facto arms embargo on over $1 billion in military assistance for Israel. And I'm also pleased to announce that this afternoon, the United States withdrew from the anti-Semitic UN Human Rights Council and ended all of the support for the UN Relief and Works Agency, which funneled money to Hamas and which was very disloyal to humanity.
No more UNHCR, no more UNRWA. RIP.
Today, I also took action to restore a maximum pressure policy on the Iranian regime, and we will once again enforce the most aggressive possible sanctions, drive Iranian oil exports to zero, and diminish the regime's capacity to fund terror throughout the region and throughout the world. We had no threat when I left office. Iran was not able to sell oil. Nobody was buying oil because I said, don't buy it. If you buy it, you're not doing any business with the United States. And Hamas was not being funded. Hezbollah was not being funded. Nobody was being funded. There would never have been an October 7th. 2 weeks ago, I once again designated the Houthis as a terrorist organization. They're trying to destroy world shipping lanes, and that's not going to happen. And over the weekend, I ordered airstrikes against senior ISIS leaders hiding in the caves of Somalia and took them out. Here in America, we've begun the process of deporting foreign terrorists, jihadists, and Hamas sympathizers from our soil, just as we have people that are extremely evil, and we're sending them out of our country. They came from jails.
Thank God we're getting the extremely evil people out, too. Okay.
Came from mental institutions and insane asylums, and they were dumped into our country. They're gang members, and we're getting them out at numbers that nobody can actually believe. And every single country is taking those people back. They said they would never take them back, and they're all taking them back, and they're taking them back very gladly. And I recently signed an executive order combating the vile wave of anti-Semitism that we've seen in the aftermath of the October 7th attacks. Together, America and Israel will renew the optimism that shined so brightly just 4 years ago. It was really a bright, beautiful light. We will restore calm and stability to the region and expand prosperity, opportunity, and hope to our nations and for all people in the Middle East, including the Arab and Muslim nations. Very important. We want the Arab and Muslim nations to have peace and have tranquility and have great lives. I'd like to now invite Prime Minister Netanyahu to say a few words, and we'll take some questions afterwards. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. President. I'm honored that you invited me to be the first foreign leader to visit the White House in your second term. This is a testament to your friendship and support for the Jewish state and the Jewish people.
Not, the Canadian PM or the Mexican president that we're currently trade warring against and our neighbors or anything, but okay.
I've said this before. I'll say it again. You are the greatest friend Israel has ever had in the White House. And that's why the people of Israel have such enormous respect for you.
Wow.
In your first term, you recognized Jerusalem as Israel's capital. You moved the American embassy there. You recognized Israel's sovereignty over the Golan Heights. You withdrew from the disastrous Iran nuclear deal. I remember we spoke about it. You said, this is the worst deal I've ever seen. I'm elected. I'm walking out of it. That's exactly what you did. And I think it speaks loudly for just common sense, just looking at things and seeing them as they are. And of course, you also brokered the groundbreaking Abraham Accords in which Israel made peace with 4 Arab states. You did this in 4 months. Nothing happened for a quarter of a century, but in 4 months, we were able, working together under your leadership, to have 4 historic peace accords. And now in the first days of your second term, you picked up right where you left off. Your leadership helped bring our hostages home, among them American citizens. You freed up munitions that have been withheld from Israel. They had been withheld from Israel in the midst of a 7-front war for our existence. And you just freed it. You ended unjust sanctions against law-abiding Israeli citizens. You boldly confronted the scourge of anti-Semitism. You stopped funding, as you just said, international organizations like UNRWA that support and fund terrorists. And today, you renewed the maximum pressure campaign against Iran. Ladies and gentlemen, all this in just 2 weeks. Can we imagine where we'll be in 4 years?
Oh,
I can. I know you can, Mr. President. For our part, we in Israel have been pretty busy too. Since the horrendous October 7th attack, we've been fighting our common enemies and changing the face of the Middle East. On that infamous day, Hamas monsters savagely murdered 1,200 innocent people, including more than 40 Americans. They beheaded men, they raped women, they burnt babies alive, and they took 251 people hostage to the dungeons of Gaza. And after this worst attack on Jews since the Holocaust, Iran and its henchmen in the Middle East were absolutely ecstatic. Haniya praised the massacre. Sinwar said that Israel was finished. Nasrallah both said that Israel was, here's what he said, is feeble as a spider's web. Well, Mr. President, Haniya is gone. Sinwar is gone. Nasrallah is gone. We've devastated Hamas. We decimated Hezbollah. We destroyed Assad's remaining armaments. And we crippled Iran's air defenses. And in doing this, we've defeated some of America's worst enemies. We took out terrorists who were wanted for decades for shedding rivers of American blood, including the blood of 241 Marines murdered in Beirut. We accomplished all this with the indomitable spirit of our people and the boundless courage of our soldiers. The Bible says that the people of Israel shall rise like lions, and boy did we rise. Today, the roar of the Lion of Judah is heard loudly throughout the Middle East. Israel has never been stronger, and the Iran terror axis has never been weaker. But as we discussed, Mr. President, to secure our future and bring peace to our region, we have to finish the job. In Gaza, Israel has 3 goals. Destroy Hamas's military and governing capabilities, secure the release of all of our hostages, and ensure that Gaza never again poses a threat to Israel. I believe, Mr. President, that your willingness to puncture conventional thinking that has failed time and time and time again, your willingness to think outside the box with fresh ideas will help us achieve all these goals. And I've seen you do this many times. You cut to the chase. You see things others refuse to see. You say things others refuse to say. And after the jaws drop, people scratch their heads. And they say, he's right. And this is the kind of thinking that enabled us to bring the Abraham Accords. This is the kind of thinking that will reshape the Middle East and bring peace. We also see eye to eye on Iran. That's the same Iran. They try to kill us both. They try to kill you, Mr. President. They try through their proxies to kill me.
Unbelievable.
We're both committed to rolling back Iran's aggression in the region and ensuring that Iran never develops a nuclear weapon. Mr. President, ladies and gentlemen, Israel will end the war by winning the war. Israel's victory will be America's victory. We will not only win the war, working together, we will win the peace. With your leadership, Mr. President, and our partnership, I believe that we will forge a brilliant future for our region and bring our great alliance to even greater heights. Thank you.
Thank you very much, baby. Very nice. Thank you. JD Vance, everybody. JD, please. Vice President, stand up. He's been doing a good job. He's been working very hard on all things, but this in particular. We'll take some questions, please. Yes, ma'am. Go ahead, please. Go ahead. Yeah, go ahead.
Can a globalization deal with Saudi Arabia be achieved without the acknowledgement of the Palestinian state? That question for you too, Mr. Prime Minister. And Mr. President, given what you said about Gaza, did the U.S. send troops to help secure the security vacuum?
So Saudi Arabia is going to be very helpful, and they have been very helpful. They want peace in the Middle East. It's very simple. We know their leader and their leaders very well. They're wonderful people, and they want peace in the Middle East. As far as Gaza is concerned, we'll do what is necessary. If it's necessary, we'll do that. We're going to take over that peace. We're going to develop it, create thousands and thousands of jobs, and it'll be something that the entire Middle East can be very proud of. But everybody feels that continuing the same process that's gone on forever, over and over again, and then it starts, and then the killing starts, and all of the other problems start, and you end up in the same place, and we don't want to see that happen. So by the United States, with its stability and strength, owning it, especially the strength that we're developing and developed over the last fairly short period of time, I would say really since the election, I think we'll be a keeper of something that is very, very strong, very powerful, and very, very good.
True. Do you know that Netanyahu speaks better English than Trump? That is true. That does feel true, yeah.
For the area, not just for Israel, for the entire Middle East, very important. And we'll, again, have thousands of jobs, and there'll be jobs for everyone, not for a specific group of people, but for everybody. Okay, please.
I think peace between Israel and Saudi Arabia is not only feasible, I think it's going to happen. I think if we had another half a year in your first term, it would have already happened.
True. Many more. I agree. Many more nations.
I think you can't prejudge and pre-guess how we'll achieve it, but I'm committed to achieving it, and I know the President is committed to achieving it, and I think the Saudi leadership is interested to achieve it. So we'll give it a good shot, and I think we'll succeed.
Yeah, please go ahead. Well, I can't tell you whether or not the ceasefire will hold. We've done, I think, a very masterful job. We weren't helped very much by the Biden administration, I can tell you that. But we've gotten quite a few hostages out. We're going to get more out. But we're dealing with very complex people. And we are going to see whether or not it holds. We certainly want to have more come out. They've come out damaged, in many ways, very damaged people. But they're going to get better, and they're going to be strong, and they're going to have a good life. And we hope to get as many as possible out. Whether or not it holds, I don't know. We hope it holds. We hope it holds.
I think that the
we hope it heals, or we hope it holds?
Whether or not it holds, I don't know. We hope it holds. We hope it holds. They're going to get better, and they're going to be strong, and they're going to have a good life. And we hope to get as many as possible out. Whether or not it holds, I don't know. We hope it holds. We hope it holds.
We hope it holds. Holds. Holds.
I think will enable us to really investigate what happened. What were the causes of the failures? By an independent commission that will be accepted by the majority of the people. We don't want it accepted by one half of the people and not the other. I think we should have it, and we should find out exactly what happened. I'm insisting on it. And believe me, it will surprise a lot of people when it happens.
Kelly, go ahead.
You were talking about. Thank you, Mr. President, Mr. Prime Minister. You were talking tonight about the United States taking over a sovereign territory. What authority would allow you to do that? Are you talking about a permanent occupation there, redevelopment? And Mr. Prime Minister, do you see this idea as a way to expand the boundaries of Israel and to have a longer peace, even though the Israeli people know how important that land is to you and your citizens, just as the space is inherited by the Palestinians as well?
I do see a long-term ownership position, and I see it bringing great stability to that part of the Middle East and maybe the entire Middle East. And everybody I've spoken to, this was not a decision made lightly. Everybody I've spoken to loves the idea of the United States owning that piece of land, developing and creating thousands of jobs with something that will be magnificent in a really magnificent area that nobody would know. Nobody can look because all they see is death and destruction and rubble and demolished buildings falling all over. It's just a terrible sight. I've studied it. I've studied this very closely over a lot of months, and I've seen it from every different angle, and it's a very, very dangerous place to be, and it's only going to get worse. And I think this is an idea that's gotten tremendous, and I'm talking about from the highest level of leadership, gotten tremendous praise. And if the United States can help to bring stability and peace in the Middle East, we'll do that. Bibi?
I mentioned again tonight our three goals, and the third goal is to make sure that Gaza never poses a threat to Israel again. President Trump is taking it to a much higher level. He sees a different future for that piece of land that has been the focus of so much terrorism, so many attacks against us, so many trials and so many tribulations. He has a different idea. And I think it's worth paying attention to this. We're talking about it. He's exploring it with his people, with his staff. I think it's something that could change history, and it's worthwhile really pursuing this avenue.
Yeah, please go ahead. Go ahead.
Can you hear me? Yeah. I'm rebuilding Gaza again. Obviously, all the hostages, and one of them is Sudanese and American soldier with the allies. How will you be sure that you will take out all the hostages and then rebuild?
We're working very hard to get all the hostages. The word is all, and we're working very hard. So far, it's been moving along fairly rapidly, pretty much on schedule. I'd love to have them all out at one time, but we're taking them out, and tomorrow more are being released, and over the days more. And then
I like how even Netanyahu has to be like, okay, listen, he's saying some shit. He's on some wild shit now. He's taking it way further than I take it, but
going to a phase 2. But we'd like to get all of the hostages, and if we don't, it will just make us somewhat more violent. I will tell you that, because they would have broken their word. Mr. Witkoff and his entire group have been working 24 hours around the clock, and they want them out, and promises have been made to them, and we'll see whether or not those promises will be kept. But we want all the hostages, that's right.
Do you support Israeli sovereignty in Judean Samaria, areas which many believe is the biblical homeland of the Jewish people?
Well, we're discussing that with many of your representatives. You're represented very well, and people do like the idea, but we haven't taken a position on it yet. But we will be making an announcement probably on that very specific topic over the next 4 weeks. Go ahead, please. Please.
You just said that you think all the Palestinians should be relocated to other countries. Does that mean that you do not support a two-state solution?
It doesn't mean anything about a two-state or one state or any other state. It means that we want to give people a chance at life. They have never had a chance at life, because the Gaza Strip has been a hellhole for people living there. It's been horrible. The Hamas has made it so bad, so dangerous, so unfair to people. And by doing what I'm recommending that we do, it's a very strong recommendation, but it is a strong recommendation. By doing that, we think we're going to bring perhaps great peace to long beyond this area. And I have to stress, this is not for Israel. This is for everybody in the Middle East, Arabs, Muslims. This is for everybody. This will be where they can partake in terms of jobs and living and all of the other benefits. And I think it's very important. It just doesn't work the other way. You know, you can't keep trying. They just has been going along for so many decades, you can't even count. You just can't keep doing. You have to learn from history. You can't keep doing the same mistake over and over again. Gaza is a hellhole right now. It was before the bombing started, frankly. And we're going to give people a chance to live in a beautiful community that's safe and secure. And I think you're going to see tremendous.
Wait, what? No. Why did that close?
You just can't keep doing. You have to learn from history. You can't keep doing the same mistake over and over again. Gaza is a hellhole right now. It was before the bombing started, frankly. And we're going to give people a chance to live in a beautiful community that's safe and secure. And I think you're going to see a tremendous outflowing of support. I can tell you, I spoke to other leaders of countries in the Middle East, and they love the idea. They say it would really bring stability, and what we need is stability. Yes, sir, please. Go ahead.
Thank you. Are you still committed to imposing sanctions on the ICC, despite the move being stalled in the Senate? And please, a question for the Prime Minister as well. The President has been very clear about his desire to achieve a deal with Saudi Arabia. How do you settle this if Israel is required to renew the war against Hamas in the future?
Go ahead, baby.
I think everybody understands that just as the President...
Does anybody else call him Bibi? I thought that was more like a casual thing. If he called him, like, go ahead, Donald, go ahead, Donnie.
...defeated Al-Qaeda and ISIS, that we can't leave Hamas there because Hamas will continue the battle to destroy Israel. They'll do, you know, when in this temporary ceasefire, one of the leaders comes out, you know what he says?
Did Biden do it to his face? Okay.
Except we'll do it bigger. So obviously, you can't talk about peace neither with Hamas or in the Middle East if this toxic, murderous organization is left standing. Any more than you could make peace in Europe after World War II if the Nazi regime was left standing and the Nazi army was left standing. You want a different future? You've got to knock out the people who want to destroy you and destroy peace. That's what we're going to do. I think that will also usher in, actually, the peace with Saudi Arabia and with others. And I think there'll be others too.
Yes, ma'am. Go ahead.
As our expectation from you. Do you have any plan to change Afghanistan situation? Are you able to recognize Taliban? Because I'm an Afghan journalist. Afghan suffer women. Any comment about Afghanistan? What's your future plan to Afghan people, especially Afghan?
I have a little hard time understanding you. Where are you from? Oh, actually, it's a beautiful voice and a beautiful accent. The only problem is I can't understand a word you're saying. But I just say this. Good luck. Live in peace. Go ahead, please. That's okay. Yeah, please.
You said earlier today it was tough for you to implement these sanctions on Iran, but you didn't indicate that you were willing to negotiate with them. What would that look like, and are you in conversations with them and the same with Prime Minister?
I hated doing it. I want Iran to be peaceful and successful. I hated doing it. I did it once before, and we brought them down to a level where they weren't able to give any money. They had to survive themselves, and they had no money. They were essentially broke. And they had no money for, as I said, Hezbollah. They had no money for Hamas. They had no money for any form of terror. The 28, if you call it the 28 sites of terror, they had no money for any of it. They had to do their own and focus on their own well-being. And I hated to do it then, and I hate to do it just as much now. And I say this to Iran, who's listening very intently. I would love to be able to make a great deal, a deal where you can get on with your lives and you'll do wonderfully. You'll do wonderfully. Incredible people, industrious, beautiful, just an unbelievable group of people in Iran. And I know them well. I have many friends from Iran and many friends that are Americans from Iran, and they're very proud of Iran. But I hated to do it, just so you understand. And I hope we're going to be able.
Holy shit, he's talking about freedom cities. He wants to make a special economic zone in Gaza, like Prospera in Honduras. This is the network state plan, a la Peter Thiel and Curtis Yarvin. He's just talking shit. I don't think he has any fucking idea what the fuck he's talking about.
A very catastrophic situation. I don't want to see that happen. I really want to see peace, and I hope that we're able to do that. They cannot have a nuclear weapon. It's very simple. I'm not putting restrictions. They cannot have one thing. They cannot have a nuclear weapon. And if I think that they will have a nuclear weapon, despite what I just said, I think that's going to be very unfortunate for them. If, on the other hand, they can convince us that they won't, and I hope they can. It's very easy to do. It's actually very easy to do. I think they're going to have an unbelievable future. Yeah, please. So go ahead.
You just laid out your plan for Gaza.
Yes.
Can you lay out your plan for Ukraine? And also...
For Ukraine?
For Ukraine, yes. You consider yourself a strong leader. You blame your predecessor for letting Russia to take over Ukraine. Will you demand from Putin to get out of Ukraine, from sovereign territory of Ukraine?
So we're dealing right now in the subject. I don't want to spend a lot of time because we're here for another reason, but we are having very good talks, very constructive talks on Ukraine. And we are talking to the Russians. We're talking to the Ukrainian leadership. It would have never happened. That would have never happened. It should have never happened. I get reports every week. The number of soldiers, mostly soldiers now, the cities have been largely demolished. You talk about a very sad sight to see. We talk Gaza. Well, many of these cities look as bad as Gaza and worse. What's happened to them? And I want to see that end. And I want to see it end for one simple reason: the life of young people being absolutely obliterated on both sides. You probably have 700,000 Ukrainian soldiers dead, 800,000, maybe more Russian soldiers dead. it's very flat land, and the only thing that's going to stop a bullet is a human body. In this case, usually soldiers. And the numbers are staggering when you hear the real numbers in Ukraine, what the numbers are. And this doesn't include the cities that have been demolished and all of the people that were killed. So I want to see it stop. We're having very good talks, and I think we're going to get it. I think something will be, hopefully dramatically, it will rise above everything. You have to. You can't let this continue. You can't. This is an absolute slaughter.
I thought it was day one. What happened to day one?
That's taking place on the beautiful farmlands of Ukraine, and we have to stop it. We can't let this continue. It is a human tragedy, and we're going to try very hard to stop it. Yeah, please go ahead, sir. Go ahead.
Mr. President, what's your view about President Abbas role in all the regional changes you want to do? In the question of the Prime Minister, what's your view on President Trump wanting to reach a deal with Iran and all the much more active military stance for?
Go ahead, baby. Go ahead.
I think the president just said something that
Go ahead, baby.
I think is the pivot of everything that we're talking about. He said Iran cannot have a nuclear weapon. And we fully agree with that. If this goal can be achieved by a maximum pressure campaign, so be it. But I think the most important thing is to focus on the goal, which the president just did, and I fully agree with it.
Well, I said it, and he said it very well. It's a campaign of pressure to see if we can get something done. He doesn't want to do what some people think will automatically happen because they're very difficult people to deal with, as you know. But if we could solve this problem without warfare, without all of the things that you've been witnessing over the last number of years, it would be. I think it would be a tremendous thing. Go ahead, please.
Do you have any plans to visit Israel?
To visit where? Oh, well, I love Israel. I will visit there, and I'll visit Gaza, and I'll visit Saudi Arabia, and I'll visit other places all over the Middle East. The Middle East is an incredible place, so vibrant, so it's just one of the really beautiful places and with great people. And I think a lot of bad leadership has taken place in the Middle East that's allowed this to happen. It's just, and that includes on the American side, by the way. We should have never gone in there a long time ago, spent trillions of dollars and created so much death. So that includes Americans. But yeah, I'll be visiting a lot of different places in the Middle East. I've been invited everywhere, but I will be visiting some, yeah. Okay.
He doesn't even know his right talking points. Like, I'm sure Netanyahu and all them in Israel were super happy to see Iraq get fucked over. But
Let's go. Caitlin, go ahead.
Thank you so much, President.
Caitlin, go ahead.
On what you were saying there.
Say it, go ahead,
Just to follow up on what you were saying about the Gazans leaving Gaza, going to other countries. One, where exactly are you suggesting that they should go? And two, are you saying they should return after it's rebuilt? And if not, who do you envision living there?
I envision world people living there, the world's people. I think you'll make that into an international, unbelievable place. I think the potential in the Gaza Strip is unbelievable, and I think the entire world, representatives from all over the world, will be there, and they'll live there. Palestinians also. Palestinians will live there. Many people will live there. But they've tried the other, and they've tried it for decades and decades and decades. It's not going to work. It didn't work. It will never work. And you have to learn from history. History is, just can't let it keep repeating itself. We have an opportunity to do something that could be phenomenal. And I don't want to be cute. I don't want to be a wise guy, but the Riviera of the Middle East, this could be something that could be so bad. This could be so magnificent. But more importantly than that is the people that have been absolutely destroyed, that live there now, can live in peace in a much better situation because they're living in hell. And those people will now be able to live in peace. We'll make sure that it's done world class. It'll be wonderful for the people. Palestinians mostly we're talking about. And I have a feeling that despite them saying no, I have a feeling that the king in Jordan and that the general president, but that the general in Egypt will open their hearts and will give us the kind of land that we need to get this done, and people can live in harmony and peace. Thank you all very much. Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you.
I'm sure they will just, with open arms. It sounds like we actually are going to get a one-state solution, the United States. True. I don't understand. Everybody's saying like Israel's going to be the 51st state. Wouldn't it be like the 54th or 53rd after we make Canada and Mexico states? Oh, Jesus Christ. We're just going to start annexing every fucking country we have problems with. We'll just make Ukraine. How do we get Russia out of Ukraine? Let's just adopt Ukraine. That'll be our 54th state, 55th state. And Greenland. And Denmark too. Why the fuck not? Jesus Christ. What about Taiwan? We'll just take all of China. Then we won't have to worry about Taiwan. What's lined up for tomorrow? I think anything else. I think I'm chatting with a cool dude. Should be fun. I need to like clean up the studio for tonight because I think it's kind of fucked up right now. And then I need to I unpack all my Gallo tech shit. All right. I'm gonna go do that. I love you. Stay safe. Be careful. Don't die.